Hey, welcome everyone. Welcome to the third session in our research to practice clinics from the Community College SSIM network. Uh, we'll be maybe wait another minute or so while people come in. So very excited today to have our third speaker, Will Tyson from University of Southern Florida. Uh, Will's done research on the compensated community model for fostering belonging amongst community college transfer students. It's an area of research that Will's been involved in for quite a long time, and we're looking forward to his comments and overview on this topic. We're going to wait maybe one more minute as people are still coming in, but then I'll turn things over to Will and let Will take it away.
Yeah, we'll take another minute.
Yeah. While we're waiting, I'll just give a quick heads up for our next and final session in June, June 12th. Dr. Elizabeth Meza will be talking about fostering a sense of belonging for STEM student success. So that's coming up. That'll be our last and final research to practice clinic for this year.
Hmm.
Well, it looks like it's a few minutes after 3, so maybe we'll get started and see where things go.
Okay. Setting up the sharing now. Can you all see it? All right, great. Okay. So my name is Will Tyson, and I'll be presenting today on fostering belonging in community college transfer students. And today we're talking about compensated community model and its impact on student success. This presentation is based on research coming up. Sorry, can you all hear the dog in the background? Just help me calibrate my talking here. Um, it's based on research that's supported by STEM and the STEM Hub, Community College STEM Network, but also Turnpike, which is a project out of the University of South Florida that I'm also a co-PI on. So I'm going to introduce the study team for this project. Um, yeah, still sharing. Um, So my name is Will Tyson. I am a co-PI for Turnpike and also a co-PI for Community College STEM Network. I'm a professor of sociology at USF, and this work is primarily based on work out of the Turnpike Project. My background is in STEM education. I'm a professor of sociology, and my research is generally on like student pathways. I got my start working on what I would call like traditional STEM research, looking at who takes calculus, chemistry, physics in high school, and how that impacts pathways into STEM bachelor's degrees. Then about 15 years ago, I got my first NSF project as a PI as part of out of the ATE program, Advanced Technological Education, and that got me started in community college STEM. ATE is more geared toward like technician pathways, so AS degrees, and kind of cycling between community college and the workforce. These projects are geared more towards community college transfer into STEM bachelor's degree programs, and that's the focus of the work today. My colleagues on this project are Elise Keekley, who was formerly a research assistant on the project. She's no longer with the project. She's a clinical research coordinator at Stanford University School of Medicine. Also part of this work was Geethi Anwar, who is a PhD student in USF sociology, and a former research assistant on this project. So, um,
Will,
so
just a quick thing. It looks like it's
yeah,
not full screen on our end. I don't know if you want to switch to full
yeah, I'll
screen.
just make it full screen. All right, see if
There you
that
go.
works.
Looks good.
The problem is, let me see here.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it so I can actually see my notes. That's part of the problem with the presentation setting. It won't even let me show my notes on on my end. So
Oh, we can go back to the other display.
yeah. So oops. Yeah. All right. So um this presentation is looking at the impact of the STEM program on community college transfer students who are pursuing engineering degrees. The Turnpike Project, which stands for Transfer Undergraduate Rural Non-Rural Student Pathways through Identity, Knowledge, and Engagement, is a partnership between Polk State College and the University of South Florida Engineering. If you're at all familiar with the region, Turnpike is kind of a play on words because the Florida Turnpike is one of the main thoroughfares through Polk County. So I credit my colleagues on that project with coming up with a cute turn of phrase. Sometimes it's difficult to come up with interesting project names. But Turnpike supports rural and non-traditional community college transfer students. And I could talk a little bit more about that project and the focus of that as we go along. But the project was originally geared towards transfer for just Polk State students, and Polk County is the county between Hillsborough County, which is where Tampa's located, and like Orange County in that area, up where Orlando is. So it's basically a very large, somewhat rural, somewhat suburban county between Tampa and Orlando. Um, but this project broadened membership to kind of all community college transfers. So any community college transfer who the community college transfer students at Polk, and then this project is geared towards community college transfers who accepted an invitation to join the Turnpike program and get the scholarship and be a Turnpike scholar. All right. So the goals of the Turnpike project were to increase opportunities in engineering education, and of course, aligning with the national goals of enhancing STEM education, of course, retention and graduation of high achieving students with financial needs. So the main goals of the STEM program. So the research question for this particular project, and this is one of three papers that have come specifically out of this Turnpike and CCSN collaboration. And all the papers get at the main questions of how do STEM programs utilize the STEM scholarships? And so how does it incentivize students to engage in academic and social support activities? And how does it help students balance work life, school demands, and enhance their academic success and retention? So within these two main questions, um, and I can go into the other papers if you want, but if you want to, get more context. But for this one specifically, we're looking at what we call the compensated community model. And that our definition is about providing financial incentives to encourage student participation in structured community building activities and academic support programs. So the purpose is to reduce financial barriers, to foster a sense of belonging, which enhances academic success and retention for low-income students. So this is part of our series of studies looking at how students use their um, their scholarship funds, basically to address the assumption that scholarships are just kind of an automatic plus for students. but we don't really interrogate how, especially given that for many students, the scholarship is not enough of an enticement to become an STEM scholar. So part of the motivation for this work is really to provide the pitch, to encourage students to become part of STEM, and this compensated community model is part of that. So brief literature review. Belonging is a major topic in the education literature. Belonging is particularly important for underserved students, including those from low socioincome backgrounds, first generation students, and students of color. These students who face unique challenges in higher education, and their academic and social integration are crucial for retention and success. This comes out of, Aston, Tinto. Both of them emphasize that students need to be specifically involved in on-campus activities, whether it be relationships with faculty, relationships with peers, student clubs and organizations, study groups, etc., in order to integrate themselves into campus life and increase their odds of retention. The main critiques of Tinto's framework, however, is that it places the burden on students for integrating themselves into campus life. That's a specific burden. Many of you maybe know that from your time as a student, and obviously from your time working in community colleges or what other institutional context you work in, that students often have a difficult time doing the work of placing themselves in a new educational context and then having the burden of making themselves comfortable, finding ways to integrate themselves, et cetera, into campus life. And as I said before, belonging is very key for underserved students. It helps them address these specific challenges. I mean, I think as probably most of us know, um, higher education communities were not often geared for students from various backgrounds. Even our community colleges often struggle to address the needs of, particularly low-income students who they're supposed to address, who they're supposed to help address. As part of this Turnpike project, it's specifically geared towards rural and non-traditional students. So we're talking about students who are older. A lot of the students in this sample are in their late 20s, early 30s. Students come from rural backgrounds, for whom, moving to Tampa is moving to the big city. So that comes with its own unique challenges. So that means that the university has to find ways to better support their academic and social integration in order to promote retention. So the methods for this study, we conducted 23 in-depth interviews and 4 focus groups with a total of 16 students, so 39 students overall. Um, our data collection focused on their personal and educational backgrounds, their decisions to major in engineering, their transition from community college to USF, and also their decision to become an STEM scholar, as well as how the STEM scholarship and the STEM program overall impacted their lives. And the data was recorded and transcribed using Rev and analyzed with Atlas TI, which is a qualitative analysis program. So this is a brief overview of one of the prior CCSN studies that's part of this collection. This research was presented at the ASE 2024 American Society for Engineering Education Conference. It's one of the papers that was published out of that conference, and you can see that there at the bottom of the slide. And I can put that link in the chat after I present if you want to get that link. But very brief summary of that research is we found 4 main themes when students described how they spend their scholarships. The first was towards optimizing work-school life balance. So students, they were able to reduce their hours from full-time to part-time or from part-time to not working at all, which gave them more time to study. So students specifically said, like, before I got this scholarship, I was working 40 hours a week. I was able to drop that to 20 hours a week. And so I'm able to come on campus more often. I'm able to, be here on Fridays. That was kind of the big day for meetings and whatnot that we'll be talking about. And so, that was one of the big factors just at the basic core. Um, having the scholarship allowed them more time. They were also able to use the STEM scholarship funds as a financial safety net. So they were able to put money away for savings, utilities, bills, any unexpected expenses. And it was basically a backup for their financial aid. So basically, it gave them a little bit more security than they had before. They were also able to reduce their commuting cost, so students could pay for gas, car repairs, or they can move on campus or near campus. Again, a lot of the students who we're talking about here were at other community colleges in the area. A lot of them from Polk State, which is the Polk State campuses are located hour and a half, up to maybe even about like close to 2 hours away, depending on traffic. So moving to campus was key for a lot of them. Those who are from more local community colleges still had a sizable commute, but were able to move to campus or at least help them pay for their transportation. And then family, medical, and financial emergencies. This was one that was quite unexpected, but we had several students give details of unique situations that their family was in, that their scholarship helped their family address these issues. One of them mentioned, family member being in a severe accident. Another one mentioned, family member, parents, suffering severe medical emergencies. One of them mentioned, their family home caught fire during their time at USF. And so these are the types of family tragedies that could derail a student's education. And particularly something like a fire would maybe cause them to drop out and have to work more in order to pay for family expenses, that sort of thing. But they were able to weather those challenges because of their STEM scholarships. So some of the key STEM program components that we found were particularly influential in the Turnpike program. Intrusive advising. That means frequent check-ins that were initiated by advisors, and these built strong advising relationships, and the students received like personally tailored advice. So basically, having a relationship with their advisors and scheduled check-ins that were initiated by the advisors helped connect them to campus. Tutoring and study groups. They were able to form these academic support groups, which help reduce isolation and improve collaboration. Students talked about, especially as transfers coming into campus, and otherwise they wouldn't know who the other transfers were if it wasn't if they didn't have this program connecting them to other students who were going through the same thing. So that helped them form these academic networks, so they weren't forced to integrate themselves in the community. They had more of an infrastructure by which to do that. And then the biweekly scholar group meetings, these are community building, professional development workshops, seminars that are focused on like personal growth, academic development, and this built a non-competitive collaborative environment. I've been fortunate enough to attend a few of these. We recruited students at one of these. I spoke at one of these, presenting some of the early findings from this research, which was great and allowed me to kind of triangulate the findings with students who participated in the project and also a new cohort of students who were able to, they weren't able to participate in the project, but they were able to say, oh, yeah, that matches some of what I've learned. And, excuse me, one of the sessions I attended was a writing seminar where was a former English PhD who I've known for actually several years, so it was great to catch up with her. But she did a whole seminar about how to write professionally, and students really enjoyed it. I also attended another one that was more about like wellness, and so these every 2 week meetings are very effective at kind of giving students the information that they need, and they're also integrated into their advising schedule as well, and encourages students to be on campus on Fridays. So some of the key themes with respect to intrusive advising. Intrusive advising um, gives students that it encourages them to spend more time on campus. They're developing specific relationships with advisors um, who are important to them. That the advisors in the interviews they name the advisors by name, saying how important they were to helping them to feel comfortable on campus, helping them to feel like they belong, and helping ease their transition into these 4 year programs. So students are able to spend more time on campus, develop these relationships, and build like build a rapport with advisors who are both familiar with general challenges that transfers deal with, but also these students' specific, unique personal challenges. Um, what makes it intrusive advising is that the advisors initiate contact with the scholars. So the advisors are the ones who take on the responsibility of setting up appointments. So it's not that the students contact the advisors as needed. The advisors say, hey, we are going to meet on this particular day. In fact, when we scheduled the interviews for this project, we worked with the advisors to kind of set it up. So, oh, what's the best way to do the interviews? And they said, okay, this is the best way to do it. You should come on Fridays that we don't have the scholars meeting. I meet with the students. You put up a sign up sheet, and I'll tell the students to do their interview with you before or after they do their meeting with me. And so we were able to schedule these interviews pretty quickly. The three of us conducted the interviews all day, and we knocked out an entire slate of interviews because the students are already going to be on campus to meet with their advisors. And then comfort. The scholars reported feeling closer to their STEM advisors than their kind of general advisors within the engineering program. They said that the meetings were less rushed. There was less pressure on them to perform. And one quote was specifically that knowing that faculty advisors are personally invested in your success makes a big difference. So this is kind of that merging between the personal and the professional. Um, Students were able to develop these relationships with their advisors that really made all the difference in giving them the confidence, the information that they needed to succeed. So study groups. The scholarships, kind of as I talked about before, reduced the need for outside employment, so that freed up more time for students to participate in the tutoring sessions and the study groups. So just very specifically, having the scholarships gave them more time to study. And tutoring and study groups are encouraged to the point that the scholars feel like participation is required, even though it's not. It feels like part of the program that they have to do. And that's something that's difficult for STEM programs to manage, right? Because um, while STEM projects have to give out a certain amount of money in scholarships, they cannot mandate that students do specific activities in order to get the scholarships. So part of the challenge is making the activities that we believe will benefit the students seem like something they have to do, even though they do not technically have to do it. So Um, so with the program taking initiative to assertively place scholars into the study groups, it makes them feel like it's required and it relieves the social anxiety around teamwork and collaboration. I mean, one of the big challenges is just getting a group together. Anytime this is kind of a common thing that we face as social creatures, right? You want to ask people to do something, there's that tension. Oh, what if I want to ask them? What if they say no? So forth and so on. But again, the tutors take on the responsibility of placing students in the groups. So basically, the students just have to show up in a supporting quote. So if you have a tutor, basically you're put in a group. Nobody ever even asks you. They tell you, you told me that you're free now, so we're going to meet at this time and you're put in this position. It helps so much. And this is something that, as a professor, as a leader, I often struggle with personally. Like, to what extent do I give the folks trying to help or folks under me freedom versus giving them structure? And one thing that we find here is the students really appreciate the structure because it relieves a lot of the kind of emotional burden and also kind of the practical challenges of doing the work like forming groups. Then we have the biweekly scholar meetings. The scholarships allow the students the flexibility to attend these scholar meetings every other Friday afternoon. Obviously, if the students were working 40 hours a week, it would be more difficult to attend meetings that take place between, I think they're between like 11 and 1 on Fridays. So just right there, having the scholarships gives them the time to attend these meetings. The meetings include guest speakers on topics like learning study habits, academic writing, de-stressing through mindfulness. And so students know they're going to show up. And it's not just that they have to be there to be there. They know that there's something specific that they're going to get out of it that will improve their life and their educational experience. And then personal and social growth. The meetings create non-competitive, collaborative environments to check in and network with peers. The networking piece is really interesting. When I went back to the biweekly meetings and presented some of our research findings, one of the students who had participated in the focus group said that the biweekly scholar meetings gave her confidence to participate in professional networking opportunities around the city. And she really talked about these scholar meetings as like her first professional networking events, where she learned how to make small talk, learn how to talk to peers about kind of their everyday, challenges and struggles. So learning how to have those like commiserating conversations, venting, things like that. And so she was able to take that experience that happens within the safe confines of a conference room in the engineering building and take that to professional networking events around town where she's networking with professional engineers, with companies that are looking to hire, and so forth. So it creates that positive environment for students where they feel like they're part of something bigger, and it gives them the skills that they need in order to, feel like and be an engineer. The supporting quote, it kind of makes you feel good sometimes. You're not alone. And that's a big part of this compensated community approach, that the students are paid through the scholarship to become part of a community. And it gives them the freedom to be in and appreciate this community and fully engage in the community so that they don't feel alone, which again is one of the challenges that transfer students may face. Because if you transfer in by yourself into this new environment, this new community, you don't know who all has been there before. You don't know who's in the same situation as you are. And something students specifically said, like, I get to meet all these people who've been through the same situation that I'm going through. They're transferring in just like me. And if, these like really brilliant interesting, fun people are having a challenge in this program, it makes me feel better that I'm having those challenges too, and we can overcome those challenges together. So, putting research into practice. Here's a slate of recommendations for community college faculty, staff, and administrators. Strengthen advising. Implement these plans that will give students the regular tailor guidance they need. Again, you may be weighing like, ooh, do we want to give them freedom? Do we want them to come as they need to? This research which would suggest providing a structure for advising and initiating contact with them is key. Encourage them to be involved in STEM-related extracurricular activities. Encourage them to be in organizations that put students together around a common interest. Even if you don't have an STEM program that kind of, excuse me, binds students together as a cohort, give them opportunities to create cohorts. Then provide academic support. Help them form the study groups that they need to form. Some of the prior research that I did on engineering students found that a lot of students feel left out of study group formation, especially when study groups happen, based on gender and race. So some students often feel left out and excluded if they don't feel like they're able to kind of engage with people with common characteristics. And then create opportunities for study groups and mentoring. Place students together, reduce a little bit of the emotional burden on forming groups. Prepare students to transfer by organizing transfer workshops. So make sure that your community college students have a sense of what they're getting into. Especially if you can do campus visits to four-year universities, that's key to kind of reduce the stress and strain of moving to a new campus. Highlighting the success stories of transfer students. So if you can bring particularly current four-year students who have transferred from your programs back to talk about it. It may feel a little weird to bring in a student who was just in your classroom a year ago as a featured guest speaker, but hearing from their peers can be so interesting and again relieve some of the stress and strain and burden that they feel. I think this is probably the best way. I don't know if I have it elsewhere in the slide, but one of the stories I always tell about this Turnpike grant and part of the process was we did a virtual workshop for students. This was because this grant was funded, during COVID, so this is a virtual workshop. We had students on there who were interested in transferring to USF, and all of them were saying like, I grew up in Winter Haven or da 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 da, and it's about 2.5 hours away from Tampa. And I'm sitting here like, no, that's like an hour and a half. And like all of them were overestimating how far Tampa was away from where they grew up. And I realized that for some of them, like they had maybe only been to Tampa on like a family trip to Busch Gardens or something like that. Or they had only been to Tampa when they were like a child. So they don't really have an idea of what it's like to drive to Tampa by themselves as an adult. And so it seems so far away. And so, figuring out ways to ease the burden of moving into the city if you're at a rural community college can be so important to making students feel comfortable with the transfer process. Obviously, giving them and then addressing the financial barriers, giving them information about scholarships, helping them with their applications, um, workshops about budgeting and managing financial aid. Financial aid is not just an academic aid, it's not just an academic decision. It is very personal, and the money that they come in that they get is fungible. So having scholarships to help pay for their education helps free them up in other areas. Also providing advice about moving to campus, how to reduce their commute, things like that. They're going to help them spend more time on campus. From the perspective of the university, universities need to do more targeted outreach in their recruitment, specifically aim programs towards community college students, develop partnerships for community colleges, to make the transfer process more seamless, hosting transfer fairs, get students on campus, host information sessions, do the work to make the transition work for the students. And then, of course, intrusive advising, as I mentioned before, establishing transfer cohorts so they don't feel isolated, have regular social events and group meetings. Um, Again, a lot of these things are not mandatory, but if you put students in the situation that they succeed and then host these events, students will feel more compelled to come. They know they'll get something out of it, particularly if you schedule it around time that you know that they have in their schedule. So, for example, with a bi-weekly meeting schedule on Fridays, at the Turnpike program, they have a good idea that the off Friday will be free in their schedule. And then, have scholarships available for transfer students. Paid internships are key as well. When we talk with students about why they started the STEM program, why they became an STEM scholar, a lot of them mentioned the opportunity for internships were a bigger priority than the scholarship money itself. All right, so if you have any questions for me, if and feel free to ask those questions. And we have some discussion questions for the group. If there's anything you want to share about your experience on an STEM project or your experience just in general. So
Well, I
first,
have
so first taking any questions. Does anybody have any questions about the presentation? See, there's some comments in the chat.
well, I had one quick observation. I was wondering, uh, what would you say would be unique about this particular group of students, as opposed to things that seem to be consistent across community college STEM students nationwide? Do you see any one or two distinct characteristics that would i- identify that group, or is it more homogeneous, similar to STEM students everywhere?
You know, I there having been to the STEM Scholars meeting and having, done our grantee survey, looking at like program elements that are common across programs, I don't think these students are any different than the kind of broader population of STEM students. Um, I'm coming at this particular project was looking at transfers into a university. So these are students at a different stage than a lot of community college STEM projects that are specifically at the community college. And so but I don't think there's anything particularly unique about this group of students aside from that they have transferred. Um, One thing, though, from learning about different STEM programs is that not all of them are as aggressive about the cohort model and about scheduling opportunities for face-to-face interaction as this program is. Obviously, all the programs are different and have kind of different things that have worked for them. But I'm biased both as the co-PI for Turnpike and having done this research. I am very much in favor of having these regular biweekly meetings and strongly enforcing the cohort model to reduce some of the social stress and strain that students feel when they're transferring into a program. And this, I think, the cohort model would also be very effective for community colleges, for incoming students to help them feel like they're part of a group who is facing the same, challenges and successes together.
Thanks. And it looks like most of the things you found really effective weren't really the most expensive aspects of the program.
No, no, no. And I mean that's really key for STEM projects because having to spend 60% of the funding on scholarships, it doesn't necessarily leave a ton of money for academic support and some of the other resources that are typically connected with student success. So in some ways, STEM forces you to provide a lot of the other um, amenities, support systems, and whatnot on the cheap. And so, yeah, a lot of what works is really the relationships and is having effective advisors who are motivated to do a lot of the legwork for the students. So we have a question in the chat. How do you get students to meet biweekly regularly? Um, First of all, it's by paying them with the scholarships and kind of providing, helping them establish the personal infrastructure to be able to get to campus. So what I said at the beginning in terms of reducing some of their additional expenses, reducing their work hours, being able to move closer to campus. If it's less of a burden for students to come to campus to meet regularly, then you can encourage them to do it. Having the intrusive advising sessions connected to a day on campus, that's going to be key to encourage them to build their schedule around these advising sessions. And then, again, building the cohort building activities, professional development, study groups around that as well. I mean, the students in this project, they came in on Fridays because they knew coming to campus on Fridays was going to be worth their while. Again, it was not mandatory, but that is when these activities that were helpful to them were scheduled. So they came. Oh, and I should mention specifically that the biweekly sessions on Fridays, they do provide lunch. That's important. Very good sandwiches. So, that's key, again, to make sure you're reducing the burden on the students. Monica?
Hey, Will, thank you for your presentation. This has been pretty interesting. I'm curious because yours were all engineering students. Based on your findings, do you think that for a smaller community college, this could be the same model would work across different study areas where not all students are engineering students? Maybe you have a mix of like some general education students or something along those lines. I'm just curious about your opinion about that.
Yes, I think that that would work. I think that what you would have to do within the community college setting, and some of this comes from my experiences getting to know ATE programs, visiting community colleges here in Florida that are part of ATE. What you have to do there is figure out what binds these students together, what they do have in common, and build around that. So that is so building a cohort around providing opportunities for them, providing obviously advising, having like job fairs, things like that, like students who are coming out of the workforce, that may be something they have in common. But you just find what the students need and kind of what they need from their peers and provide those opportunities. Um, it may be a little bit more difficult for scheduling around them. And obviously, if you don't have the scholarships that help free up some of their time, that can be a little bit more difficult to do this. But I would say find what they have in common and try to build around that. Maybe you can't have bi-weekly activities, but maybe you can, schedule well ahead of time and have events that they are coming together for, and you know, find find different opportunities within the schedule to bring students together. Yeah, and so following up from the question on here, who funds lunch? Yeah, STEM grants can be used for food, but the university funds can provide it. I don't know exactly where the funding for lunch comes from, but I would assume it's just the engineering program buying lunch. Other questions? All right, does anybody want to share any best practices that they've implemented? Yeah, yeah, exactly, John. I think this the Turnpike grant is like a $3 million grant, so I don't think they have any problem throwing a few $100s every 2 weeks to help support a $3 million grant. So does anybody want to share any best practices at your institution that have promoted transfer or help support community college transfer students? Or any challenges, successful initiatives?
Well, we have some challenges, and that's just getting the students to follow through with the actual transfer process. And I'm just wondering, do you reach out to any specific, do you have any relationships with any community colleges? I'm wondering if that could be a tool to kind of help the students establish the sense of belonging with the intended transfer institution before they actually transfer, so they have some contacts and you get over that next step barrier.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big part of it is developing those relationships. Now, with this particular grant, the foundation of the grant is supposed to be the relationship between Polk State and USF, and they're working very closely. But with some of the challenges of recruiting and retaining students during COVID, the project was broadened out to any community college transfer. So we have community college transfers from other colleges in the state, and even some community colleges from outside of the state who are STEM scholars, who have been STEM scholars at USF. But the key is, I think part of the key is helping students be familiar with what to expect in going to a four-year institution. And both in terms of like your kind of brass tacks academic stuff, but then also just like what it's like to live on or near campus, what it's like to move to a larger city, um, things like that, that things you may not think about as a professional that would cause a student stress and uncertainty. Um, and a lot of students would have to leave their families, leave their jobs to do this. And one thing that you want students to do within the STEM program is to kind of treat being an engineering student or being a student in whatever four-year program as like a job. And some of the students did specifically say that the scholarship helped them feel like this was their first engineering job. So I think it's really key for some students, maybe not all, to feel that way, and that's going to help them with that transition. It feels like taking a job, which is something that they've done before, that may not be as intimidating as going to a large university to get a bachelor's degree. And not only that, treating it as getting a job is also something that may be more familiar for their families as well, and less daunting for their families than seeing it as like, getting a four-year degree, especially for students who are first generation, whose families just may not be familiar with that. So I think it's part of how you frame the experience for students and make it more comfortable for them.
Well, while we're waiting for other questions, I was wondering, I know you're not the PI on the STEM, but do you happen to know anything about their data on any improvements in retention or completion or anything like that? Any numbers on the impact of this on particularly on retention?
I don't have that specific data on retention, but that's something that I can look at.
Yeah, I was just curious. I can't see how it wouldn't help retention.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it is hard. It would be difficult though to, given the context that this study started in 2020. So there's a lot of other factors that play into retention um, and progression towards degree. So I can't specifically vouch for the numbers, and it would be hard to draw a lot of conclusions for the numbers given how many different challenges students were having with the broader context of the COVID pandemic and whatnot at the time. Um, and that's one reason why we were able to get the no cost extension to keep it going because, there was just a lot of challenges early in the project with getting students to, sign up to be STEM scholars at that stage in the project and just with everything going on in the world. Seems like a long time ago, but it wasn't.
And I think in many cases that they wouldn't even be a baseline, right? Because
Yeah,
transfer students come in, they disappear in the university, and the only data be some sort of gross aggregate national type data.
right,
So even knowing what their baseline was is probably just a guess.
right. Any questions or comments?
Well, one other thing that came up is this seems like it's been mentioned already, but there was really strong collaboration between the community college and the university. From your view as a third party observer, any takeaways as far as best practices, how to make that work either from one side or the other, either from the community college side or from the university side?
That's difficult. And that's something that it's hard to say, give some sort of guarantee silver bullet solution, because every context is different. Sometimes you have the, community colleges that are in close proximity to the universities where they're, sharing a lot of resources where students are maybe more familiar with campus because it's not that far away. And then you also have the challenges that, well, for this project, that there is a decent amount of distance between them. Students may not be familiar with the city, may not be familiar with campus, so forth and so on. And I'll be candid that there were some personnel challenges along the way, and some of the folks, from Polk State took different jobs and, some faculty retired, some folks retired. And so there was a lot of transition on that end. Some of it is just that's something that's going to happen over the course of 5+ years. Um, but I think the biggest thing is just try to build in those relationships and maintain that mutual commitment to the students. And then also make sure that as much as possible within the confines of an STEM grant, that everyone is compensated adequately for their work. So be careful about including too many people in the project if you can't give them compensation within the project or from other resources that may be available at the college or at the university. You don't want to wear on people's time and energy and effort, without making sure that they're taken care of. Because that's we see that type of abuse, frankly, within higher ed spaces, and it doesn't do anybody any good. All you're going to do is burn people out over the course of a long grant. You don't want to abuse someone's love and affection for the students, by taking advantage of them and saying, "Well, we can't pay you because we got to do X, Y, and Z." No, you need to make sure you take care of them.
Thanks. Um, I see Pete's on. Pete, I don't know if you're connected, but I know that you have a good connection with Oregon Tech, which isn't too far from your campus. I don't know if you're available to mention anything about that or if that's changed at all now that you actually have an STEM. Any observations you could help us out with?
No, we have actually um, gone up and met with the people at Oregon Tech. And we, part of our support is a first year work experience. And we have two work experiences. One is an actual job site. So that's for second year students. So now are going to have a first year, and that's where they're going to go up to Oregon Tech, for example. They'll do field trips. So they'll go like a field trip up to Oregon Tech. They'll have speakers. We'll have speakers come to campus, this kind of thing. So yeah, we've already established that. And they're real receptive. And so that's a pretty exciting part of what we're doing.
Great, and you're pretty close by, right? It's not that far.
Right. It's about as far away. We live in a small rural community, but it's about as far away as possible. In the metropolitan area, it's 20 minutes. So I know for most people that's not a big deal. For us, that's a big deal. But yeah, no, it's right. It's drivable. So we're in good shape there.
Thanks.
You
Well,
bet.
as we're winding down, any final questions or comments before we adjourn for today? So I just want to remind everybody that coming up next time, June 12th, Elizabeth Maisel will be focusing in on a sense of belonging, something that's come up here and there amongst the things that Will's been mentioning. So our next session will really focus in on that particular aspect of improving the STEM students' experience. So let's do a virtual applause for Will, and I'll hopefully see all of you next time.
Thanks, Will.
Okay, thank you very much. Y'all have a good weekend.